Hey everyone, this is Spoonie, and who doesn't love a good comic book crossover? I especially love it when they take different franchises from different universes and smash them together. I'm going to show off some of the stuff in my collection. If you're interested in me going into depth on any of this, just leave a comment. I know there is stuff I have that won't be in this video, and if I can scrounge it up, perhaps I'll do a part two. So obviously, first off, you see here JLA Avengers, Kurt Busiek and George Perez. They were coming recently off of a multi-year run on the Avengers from Marvel. It was really successful. If you can track down any of that stuff, it's worth a read. And if you're going to do a big Universal crossover thing, having George Perez, who did the Crisis on Infinite Earths, I think makes a big difference, especially since the anatomy on his characters is different. It's not just the same body types you see reproduced throughout. Next up is a cool one. It's Marvel Zombies versus Army of Darkness. Now, Marvel Zombies, besides being kind of a pun designed to sort of slander Marvel fans who all they bought was Marvel Comics back in the day, um, it's a somewhat successful series. Well, it was successful about, 15 years ago. The idea being that some kind of zombie plague spreads on Earth, but it spreads throughout the superhero community first. And because they're superpowered, nobody can stop them, and they kind of eat the planet. And, anyways, this was a sort of crossover, but it actually was kind of a prequel to the Marvel Zombie series because it offers a possible explanation to how the zombie thing started, being that it's supernatural. Up next, you see I've got Aliens versus Predator. Now, this is both. You can see it's published by Dark Horse Comics. Sorry, both of these franchises, the publishing rights were owned by Dark Horse at the time, and both films were like owned and produced by Fox. So basically, Dark Horse reached out to them and said, what if we do like a crossover? And, they said yes, and it ended up being really successful and spawned a whole sort of separate franchise. Here I've got Superman Aliens. This was obviously it's a DC and Dark Horse crossover for Superman and the Aliens brand. This actually kind of ties into the continuity of Superman, where he was self-exiled in space. So it's cool because you can enjoy this as a story or as part of the larger narrative. And speaking of Superman versus aliens, I've got here Superman and Batman versus Aliens and Predator. Now, this was a 2-issue prestige format miniseries. I don't remember what the storyline's about, but the art is nice. Next, I've got Superman Madman Hullabaloo. This was a 3-issue miniseries co-published by DC and again Dark Horse Comics. Madman being a original creation by Mike Allred. And like the majority of his work, especially all the Madman stuff, he wrote and drew this entire book, and his wife Laura did all the coloring on it. Now, for a book that feels like it should be from the 90s, but is actually from the early 2000s, we've got the Darkness and Superman team up against the 2-issue mini. So I've got both of them here. You can see it's got Ron Mars writing, and I think that's Tyler Kirkham on penciling. So it at least looks good, and Ron Mars was doing, I believe, Witchblade at the time, really good run. So as I recall, this was at least a good read. Now I've got Superman in Gen 13. At the time, technically, Wildstorm had been bought and was owned by DC Comics. However, they maintained it as a separate imprint. It had its own editorial and its own sort of publishing division. So I'm going to count this stuff. So obviously, it's Superman in Gen 13. Gen 13 was the kind of, I guess, like Teen Titans or whatever of the Wildstorm universe. They have a lot of ties to the older characters through like Team 7 and stuff like that. Anyways, 3-issue miniseries. There were a lot of different variant covers for these, as there often was for Image, I guess, Wildstorm-related stuff. You can see the main artist for the series here was Lee Bermejo, and he did variant covers for everything. And you can see his artwork's really coming along compared to sort of where he's at now. All right, now I've got another Gen 13 book. This is Spider-Man Gen 13, published by Marvel Comics, and it was still Image at the time. They had sort of established Wildstorm as its own label, but it was still published under the Image banner. This is a one-shot. I couldn't tell you what it's about. Another Spider-Man crossover book here. We have Batman and Spider-Man. Obviously, DC and Marvel publishing this one. This is actually a really good story. The two team up against their respective villains, Kingpin and Ra's al Ghul, and it's a really good story. If you can find a copy, I definitely recommend picking it up because for a little self-contained crossover, this works really well. My next Batman book here is Batman Deathblow After the Fire. I know it just says DC Comics on this trade, but like with the Gen 13 books, it was co-published by DC and Wildstorm as separate imprints. Now this one's really cool. First of all, I got this particular edition at the dollar store. This was about $4 at the time. And it's a 3-issue miniseries, and what's really interesting about it is, so it's a crossover between Batman and Deathblow, but at this point, Deathblow's been dead for 10 years. It's a really interesting story where the narrative he weaves kind of cuts between the past and the present, and it's really recommended, especially at that price. You can snag it at the dollar store. We got more Deathblow here, which is Deathblow and Wolverine. Now, this is actually, it was a 2-issue miniseries. I've got one of the original sort of collections of it, one of the early trades. Obviously, this is, you can see here, Image and Marvel Comics, but once again, Wildstorm was established as its own kind of distinct imprint within Image. Okay, following up from the Deathblow Wolverine, we've got Team X versus Team 7. Now, as you can see front and center, it is Deathblow and Wolverine again, but this does feature sort of the extended teams of both characters. So you've got the Team 7, that's Grifter. You've got Team X, that's Sabretooth over there, and all the other kind of supporting characters. Next up is kind of a weird one, Star Trek X-Men. Published by Marvel Comics, and it actually says Marvel Presents Paramount Comics. It's a really interesting setup here. You can see it's the early 90s, kind of the Jim Lee classic X-Men in terms of their costumes and who's on the team. It's the original series Star Trek. So, like you see on the cover here, almost half the book is penciled by Marc Silvestri. I forget who does some of the other work on it, but there are some noteworthy people who come in and do like sort of secondary pencils and stuff like that. Okay, I've got here more X-Men in the form of the Uncanny X-Men and the New Teen Titans. Now this was printed, I think, in the early to mid 80s when both of these books were really hot. I don't remember who did the art on this. I don't even know if I've actually read it. I just know it's in my collection. Now for something kind of interesting, the New Avengers and the Transformers. Now this was cross-published by Marvel Comics and IDW Comics. They're the company with the light bulb as their logo. I don't know if they still exist, to be honest with you. Anyways, IDW is building its own mythology of Transformers at the time. Bendis had just launched New Avengers, and this could fit into New Avengers continuity between issues like 7 and 8 or something like that, but it really is its own self-contained thing. It was a 4-issue miniseries. I do have all 4 issues here, so that's number 1 and 2. And then you can see there I've got issues number 3 and 4. Now I've got another crossover, Wetworks. Again, it's a Wildstorm brand, but it's published by Image. And Vampirella, who at the time was published by Harris Comics. I don't know if they're still around, if they're still publishing Vampirella. I don't know who's got the publishing rights on the character. Anyways, Wetworks was a team that hunts vampires and werewolves. Obviously, Vampirella is one, so I'm guessing they team up to hunt bad vampires. The Authority and Lobo, Spring Break Massacre. This is actually the second of a series of holiday sort of books they did between these two characters. Again, you got the separate imprints thing here, so I'm counting this as intercompany crossover. So here I've got Lobo and Mask, co-published by DC and Dark Horse Comics. There's not a lot to say beyond what you see on the cover here. So Lobo's obviously has got a knife to the Mask's throat, and then Mask has a banana because he's silly. Now, this is the version of Lobo where he can't die because he can't go to heaven or hell because they don't want him. So even if there's like a mist of blood, he can regenerate from that. And then obviously the Mask is like kind of a living cartoon character. He can't be killed. It's a 2-issue miniseries. I've got both issues. Keeping on with the Mask, I've got here Grifter and the Mask. Again, it's another Dark Horse Comics production, but this actually does have the Wildstorm stamp on it. Now, I do believe they still were an Image Comics company when this was published, but they were establishing their own brand at the time. Now, again, this is a book I don't know much about. I don't know that I've read it. I do have both issues of it, though. Okay, some more Grifter here. This is Grifter Badrock. Again, this is seemingly only published by Image Comics here, but at the time, Grifter was part of Wildstorm, and Badrock was on the Youngblood team, which was a part of Rob Liefeld's Extreme Productions. So it's the same Ultimate publisher, but you've got two distinctive brands here. You got Wildstorm and Extreme. I do have a Badrock Violator from the Spawn universe crossover somewhere I'd like to get my hands on again. And last up, you have the quintessential crossover, The Punisher meets Archie. I believe this is the direct market edition because I think the newsstand version is called Archie Meets the Punisher with a different cover. This looks like John Buscema's version of the Punisher on it. I don't know who does the interior. But this is actually kind of a funny read. And so there you have it. Like I said, I do have more books that I would like to kind of show off, assuming I can kind of scrounge them together. And once again, if you want to see me show any of these in detail, just leave a comment. All right, thanks for your time. Bye.